Those we'll get this eventually. Those are the fruits, and mesem fruits, when they open, they're really beautiful. The mesem family is a really large family, and they live in all sorts of environments. And this one was really strange to me because I've seen a lot of mesems, but this stomatium was emerging from underground in the fall. During the summer, it had been underground, and now it's cracking. It's cracking through the soil and coming out into the sunlight. There's another one in the background. I'm not going to mention it every time because it gets redundant and boring, but the leaf pair, does this have a pointer? Yes. These two leaves are of a pair, and you see that one leaf is much bigger than the other leaf. And it's just the way mesems are. They have this strange symmetry called anisophylly. This is Titnopsis promosii, and now we're far inland, and these grow in really broad, shallow pans. You can see the typical grit. Another function that the grit performs is that when the seeds fall down in between the stones, it's the perfect assistance to help them survive. The mesem seeds are really small. When the seedling germinates, they're very tiny. They're only 1 millimeter or less than a 1/16 of an inch. And the little seedling, for the first 2 or 3 months, it's out of sight. It's down in a crevice between these rocks. Another feature that the rocks perform is that they keep everything really stable. If it does rain, there's no erosion. This is a very tiny plant. It's called Charadopsis minor. The whole plant here is 1 inch across. And all of these little tiny leaves, you can see the kind of a swirling pattern of the way it has grown over time. And I was talking to one of the members here before ground. In many of the pictures, you're going to see rabbit turds, and there are a lot of rodents around here. I usually don't remove the turds from the picture, but again, there's so many forms in the mesems, and there's so many tiny ones, and many of us really like the tiny ones. Now this is completely different. The leaves are fused into a ring. You can see the little collars where there's a ring. That's a growth ring. So that's 1 year's growth. And how big do you think the plant is? It's tiny, but the whole plant from the ground up to the top of the stems is about 2 inches. So you can see all these rings along here. It's taken quite a few years for it to grow up to be 2 inches high. Brownanthus schenkii. These little glassy type plants are what a lot of people are really interested in. They look like little pieces of glass growing out in the rocks. And this whole plant from top to bottom, it's less than 1/2 inch across. And I'll have some more pictures so you can see them in different aspects, but it's conophytum pubescens. It's called pubescens because the top surface of the leaf has really fine hairs on it. They're very fine. Here's a side view of conophytum pubescens. A lot of times you'll be hiking in these desert regions, and oftentimes here the annual rainfall is just around 2 inches per year. So it's very dry. And most of what I'm showing you is just active in the wintertime when it's cold. Here where pubescens grows, quite a few nights freeze. There's probably 50 nights where there's a little bit of frost. And oftentimes when you're walking around, you'll just see these pink flowers just coming right up from the rocks. These plants really like to grow on rocks or in rock cracks. And the main reason is for stability. Here, this species, Conophytum yarmile, it only grows on one rock outcrop. The entire colony is much smaller than a football field. They're just on the one side of this rock that faces east, so it gets shade in the afternoon. And now they're in full flower. It's quite beautiful to see these things in nature. There's a detail of the flower. The individual heads here are about the size of a large pea. And you can see the sheath. The plants along here, they're still partially covered with the sheath. They make a sheath to protect the body during the summer when it's hot and dry. And in the summertime, you don't see anything green or alive at all. Then when fall comes, they start to crack out of the sheath. And most conophytums flower at the beginning of the growing season. And the first thing they do is to flower so they have enough energy to make a fruit during the winter rainy season. Yeah, they picked a hard place to grow. Those plants, they're about the size of a small marble that kids play with, or they're about a half an inch across. And they like to grow on the rocks because of all the reasons that I said, mainly because the rocks condense moisture out of the cold winter night air. So a little bit of water will trickle down, like maybe 5 drops of water on a good winter night. Now they're coming into flower. That is the flower bud coming out, and these flower at night. They have a yellow flower, Conophytum pagei. These two are really tiny. You wouldn't really know it from the picture, but these plants, the individual heads were between 1/4 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch across. And during the summer, they pull themselves down below the grit. Then when you get into late fall and it really starts to cool down, then they start to pop up and they come up back into the light when they flower. This quartz grit, there's just millions of acres of this quartz grit. It's just incredible. And when you see this quartz grit, you know that there's going to be something. You nearly always find some interesting plants. Here's Charadopsis schlechteri. And this on top is the fruit. They flowered just about a year ago. And then it took 6 months to form the fruit. Nothing happens during the summer. It just sits there and waiting. They just endure the summer. They just go into complete dormancy, and they wait for the coolness of fall to arrive. And now they're starting to green up. This is also a very tiny plant. The whole plant is just a little over an inch across, but the flowers are huge. The individual flowers are over 2 inches across. So it makes quite a show. Sometimes the habitats are very different. And in this case, this Van Herdia primosii, it's growing in a desert pan, or in the Southwest, we call them a playa. And it's dry. It's completely dry 99.9% of the time. So over the years, you can see all the caliche. These white bits are bits of caliche that has formed by the water dissolving calcium carbonate out of the rocks, and then it accumulates, and then these alkaline crystals form. So here it's very alkaline. And here too, it's far inland, so it freezes quite a bit at night. Most mesembs love to be cold. They like the cold part of the year, the vast majority of them. I can't think of a single mesem that's really happy when it's hot. They just sort of endure it. But these grow in these really alkaline pans. It looks kind of like it's good for the Year of the Dragon contest, right? The Year of the Dragon coming up. These little plants have a gaping mouth with teeth.
Yeah,
They look like little tiny dragons. It's Stomatium alvarosium, and it too was growing in these caliche flat pans, and they flower at night. The flowers open after it's dark, and they're very fragrant. And then moths come to find the flowers and pollinate them. Some more plants here in these alkaline caliche pans. It's Charadopsis excavata. And they're soft little guys. They're real smooth to the touch, and they're kind of soft and squishy. So you have a soft and squishy plant growing in all of these hard rocks, but they manage just fine. Now, I'm sure all of you know about, or have at least have grown some haworthias. Can you see the haworthia? And next to it, off to the left, is Conophytum pubicalyx. And it's one of the tiniest of all mesembs. The red flowers, they have popped up. The heads are much smaller than a pea. The individual heads here are roughly about the size of a BB. Do most of you know what a BB is?
Yeah.
It's the little round balls that you shoot with a BB gun. Anyway, all of these little tiny heads here are just BB sized. And then next to it, here's the Haworthia arachnoidea. And it's probably not how they look in cultivation too often, is it? No, this Haworthia, where it's living here, the annual rainfall is about 3 inches a year. About 50 winter nights go below freezing. Not really cold, but it's just a light frost, just a few degrees of frost. and they pull down deep into the ground, and the leaves are so tight together that you can hardly see any green. So it's fun to see all sorts of this stuff. Now here we have a situation that you see pretty, it's not a rare thing to see a scene like this, but the soil here is either nothing, or it could be an 1/8 of an inch deep layer of rock grit. You can see in this area here, there's a big piece of exposed rock, but this whole area is just rock. And in some of the areas where there's a lot of these conophytums, there's a very shallow layer of grit. And you just have to imagine, I don't think there's any cactus that has a prayer of a chance of living here, because they're living, the soil is, like I said, about an 1/8 or maybe 1/4 of an inch deep of just broken rock bits. And just look at all of the conophytums here. They're out in the complete full sun. The summers are bad. There's 0 rain for 6 or 7 months. And look at how happy all of these conos are. They're still dormant, but it was just at the very beginning of the growing season. You can see here, you can see the red flower buds poking out, and there's some red flower buds. So they're just starting to wake up. There's another flower bud. You get used to looking for tiny stuff. Another tiny plant that lives here in the same place, this Antimema lodovicii. This is a really large one. The whole plant was about 2 inches across. And all of these, it has at least 200 pairs of leaves in this little tiny space. It would be smaller than the palm of your hand. And it's coming into flower. And you can see what it's on. It's just rock. And did you notice this? The rabbit turd? I'll give you an idea of the scale.
What's a rabbit turd? Wait, what?
Rabbit poop.
Oh, okay.
Look at the soil here. It's just, it's a lot like if you just got some crushed glass. Echo, do you see the baby?
Yes,
Right here's a baby. And this plant here is about 3/8 of an inch across. That's the mama, that's the adult. It's Conophytum caroli. It's a very rare plant. Very few people have ever seen it. And then here's the fruit up here. And the top is brown and rough. And you can see there's a big leaf and a little leaf. Now something with a little more color. Here's Conophytum uviforme. The Latin word for grape. Do you know what that is, Roder?
Oh, yeah.
It's uva.
It's
So the Latin word for grape is uva. And these are like little tiny grapes. They're much smaller than a grape, but it's like a bunch of little grapes. So it's got the name uviforme. And it's got the extra feature of lots of lines and dots all over the body. So this plant is very widespread. You see it in many places. It's a quite beautiful plant. Now, this again is really one of the tiny guys. It looks like it's out of focus, but the top of the plant is completely covered with dense white hairs. So it's like trying to take a picture of a cotton ball or something. It's not really, it doesn't, it looks like it's out of focus, but it's just looking at a whole bunch of hairs.
I have a question. Sorry. How is it possible for you to spot something like this out of habit?
Practice,
That's fair.
40 years of practice, but I'm getting old, so it's not as easy anymore. But this is kind of item depressing. And you would think it's called depressing because you get depressed trying to find it.
No, because I got depressed in the soil.
But it's called depressing because for about 8 months of the year, it's invisible. Now I have to set the scene here. The whole scene here is a little depression in a piece of solid rock that's about the size of the palm of your hand. And the plant itself, the individual heads are about the same size as the eraser on a standard size pencil. So underneath is solid rock. And from over the millennia, that's a new word that Roder just learned.
No, I already knew it. I just didn't
So-
remember what it was.
Anyway, over the millennia, rock chips off from the big rock and it falls down into this little depression and it accumulates. And how plants can live in a place like this is it's hard to understand. Here's another one. You can see the fissure here. This is another plant that very few people have ever seen, but it is absolutely incredible. Here's what depressant looks like without the flower bud. This is a large plant. It's got multiple heads. This one's even smaller. It's called reconditum because it's hidden. So this too is growing in a rock grit pan. It's underneath it, it's just solid rock where a bunch of grit has accumulated. And the individual, this is likely all one plant. This one offsets a lot and it branches a lot. And the individual heads, they're smaller than the head of a match. They make these clusters. So you can be walking along. I have to set the scene here of what it's like to look for these. You can be walking along an enormous granite dome. It could be several acres in size. And you look for little depressions in the granite dome where you can see where there's a bunch of grit. So you're just walking from little depression to little depression. And we looked at hundreds of depressions and we found one that was full of reconditum, just one. So it's just amazing how, first of all, how they get there, how they survive. Somewhere over here.
No, the green thing.
Oh, the green thing, that's an ornithogalum bulb. I showed before those two pages living under a rock. A lot of times, most plants of Conophytum pagei in the wild, they develop this red lipstick feature in the middle. And it makes them very attractive and very desirable. Anybody know what this is in the middle here? Yeah, it's a Crashula deceptor. They're growing in this little depression in the rock. Well, now for something completely different. We're out of the rock pan phase here for a while. Here's Scaledium emarcidum. And it's called Scaledium because the old leaves, this one especially, when the leaf is growing, it's green, but after the leaf has run its course, it dries and it leaves, it looks like a skeleton of leaf veins. That's where the name comes from. And this one has the other property of that the plants have a mild mind altering. It's not really hallucinogenic, it's more mood altering. The indigenous people that lived here, they would chew on this, and they would chew it kind of like you would bubble gum or gum, and just chew it over and over in your mouth without swallowing it. And I tried it once, and all I did was it made me really nervous. I didn't really care for it. The other, well, I shouldn't say the other, but one of the other habitats that we explore a lot in South Africa are the mountains. And the mountains in the background are out of focus, but on this day, we spent the whole day hiking to the top of a huge granite dome mountain. It took all day to get up to the top and get back down. And up on top, we started seeing these mesembs. And they're growing at over 5,000 feet high. So in the wintertime, it freezes a lot here. There's snow on a few occasions where they'll be buried under snow. And I took a detail of the plant. You can see the beautiful pink coloration on the new growth on the leaves, and they're in flower. And there's even an ant walking around looking for nectar. Yeah, Antamima. I don't know what it is, but it's in the ballpark of Lawsonii. And this is what mesembs look like when you're up high in the mountains where it's cold. The coloration is just fantastic. You're not going to get this coloration unless you live in a place where it freezes quite a bit. And this picture was taken in the middle part of fall. So it's starting to get cold at night. It would be equivalent to our October. Here in the Southern Hemisphere, obviously the seasons are just opposite of ours.
Mr. Brack. Oh, I'm just noticing how vivid these colors were.
No, it's amazing.
Do you do any post-processing?
No,
or is this
nothing.
just,
It's just raw.
what kind of camera are you using?
It's a Canon camera. It's just a fantastic camera. It's a power shot.
Really?
Yeah, it's I use it because the lens is just amazing. It goes from 18 millimeters to 1100 millimeters.
Wow.
So I have a really powerful zoom too, which I don't have pictures. It's out of the scope of this program, but when you're walking around here, you see a lot of interesting animals and birds. And so I have lots of pictures of, there's many kinds of antelope that live there. There's about a dozen kinds of antelope, and sometimes you see zebras and various, well, baboons. And don't get me started about the baboons.
Oh.
They think and they know that they're way better than we are. Have any of you gone to be around baboons in South Africa?
I know.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're always saying, nah, 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 nah.
Yeah.
They run around the rocks like crazy, and we struggle So when you're up on these high mountains in the mountainous parts of Namaqua, the winters are quite moist. So there's huge areas that are just loaded with moss and lichen. And this rock that we climbed, it was just massive. So in the moss and in the lichen, you find succulents. How does this work for the year of the dragon? It looks pretty mean. It's a rough, or it looks like an old wordy toad, but they're very tiny. It's Conophytum amisbrigens. And I think I see, right, there's a baby. And this is probably a baby. And this looks to be like a baby. And it's, I'll set the scene. It's growing on a 45-degree slope, solid granite. There's a thin layer of moss and lichen on the rock. There's basically no soil. And here these conophytums decide to live. But one thing that I'm not emphasizing is in the wintertime when it's drizzling or when there's been snow, there's water's going to be seeping down this slope for days. And I'm going to show you, this is a very, very old conophytum. I have never seen anything like this. It's a tower of conophytums. The thing could be 100 years old.
How large is that?
It's about 2 inches high, maybe 1.5 inches, something like that. Yeah, it's good to ask what kind of a scale we're dealing with here. And I told you animal pictures. When we were up on top of this mountain, we sat down to have a little snack, and this gecko came over to me, and he wouldn't go away. I thought he would be terrified, but as I was sitting, I was just sitting on the rock, and he kept crawling around under my legs, between my legs, growing behind my back, and I was afraid to move because I didn't want to smash him. It's half the time he was under my body, and maybe he was looking for shade, but look at the beautiful lichen on the rock. It's just spectacular.
Yeah, and
So in addition to seeing all these beautiful succulents, you see geckos, and you get to hear baboons mock us for our inferiority. I hope you don't think this is a dead plant.
and I see them.
It's also taken in the morning when after there's been fog. And that's not the flower. You know how small mesembs seeds are? Echo. Look, you can see the individual seeds. So the fog opened up the fruit. The fruits only open up when they're wet. And this used to have one of the best names in botany. It was, for 100 years, it was known as Caridopsis cigaretifera. Can you think of a better name for this plant?
I love it.
And the sheath is the cigarette. And down inside, here's the new leaves that will come out. So down in all of these cigarettes, the leaf is just waiting for the rains to start coming in the fall. And so they're getting ready to pop up. And in the next couple of weeks, they'll start popping up, and they'll expand in size by about a factor of 20. They'll get to be 2 or 3 inches long.
Oh,
Why do you have to change the name?
Because somebody found a name that was older. And the rules are, if there's an older name, And it's called Namaquinsis, which is, it's an okay name, but it's really boring compared to Cigaretifera. So what do you suppose we call this plant when we're out in the field? We call them cigars. You know, cigarette for short, but anyway. Cigaretifera will never die with me. Okay. See the flowers coming out of the stones? The flowers are about 5/8 of an inch long. And then all of the heads of the pubic calyx coming out. And it's so amazing to see a scene like this in the wild. To see these red flowers popping up. Unfortunately, they only open during the night. And it's too dangerous to climb on these granite domes in the dark. At least I've never tried it.
What are the pollinators? Must be moths.
Yeah, it must be moths. That's what you see most of the time when you're looking for these little conophytums. That's what you see when they're coming into flower. Just these flower buds popping up out of the rock grit. It's pubescens. And remember, this one grows where it freezes at night in the winter quite a bit. Is this better for the year of the dragon?
It's more the shark instead of the dragon.
Okay, this is Odontophorus,
Oh,
which is a cool name. Marlothii is named after a guy, but Odonto, it means that it has teeth. It's with teeth, and forus means that it possesses the teeth. So that's a pretty cool name. Odontophorus means that it has lots of teeth. The teeth are not sharp. They're real soft. And they're kind of, they're not like paper, but it's like a little bristle.
And fish.
This is another plant that gets an award for great plant names. Have any of you ever grown this, or do you know about this plant? It's Charodopsis means that it makes a sheath. The carrot part talks about the sheath that it makes to protect it from the summer sun. And then peculiaris means what it's obvious. And this is what they look like in their resting state in the late summer, early fall. The new body is inside the sheath. There is a full-size leaf pair in here. And then here's the fruits. As soon as the rain starts coming in the fall, then the rain will open the fruit and the seeds will get splashed out. But it is a very peculiar plant. I cheated. I spilled a little water on the fruit from my water bottle. Gave it a few drops of water, and the fruit opens up, and the fruits are really beautiful. They'll open many times, and you can see the seeds down in here. See all the little specks. They have very tiny seeds. And one of the advantages for this kind of a fruit, if the fruit takes a direct hit with a raindrop, everything is designed to channel and exaggerate the splash. So the raindrop hits in the middle, and then there's a splash, and the seeds go flying out. And they'll usually go out just a few feet.
Are those black little dots the seeds?
No,
No. It's just-
well, I'll show you. The seeds are in here.
Oh.
They're little tiny,
Oh.
little brown. This is just a stain that was on the leaf from the previous year. And oh man, I didn't realize it until just now. Look at that pollinator. Rhodor, is that a diptera? You know all of your insects. It looks like a little fly. And the fly is pollinating. This species flowers during the day. It's Conophytum wettsteinii. Wettstein was a guide. He was a German man who studied the plants of Southern Africa back in the 1800s. But the flowers are really brilliant, and we saw a rare white one on this hike. Another Odontophorus. All Odontophorus have teeth. This one, the leaves are much narrower. And as usual, it's growing on the rock. It's either quartz or quartzite or granite usually. There are areas in Southern Africa where there's basalt, and they're almost completely sterile. It's too hot. Everything cooks. Usually Conophytum bilobum has yellow flowers, but in this area, they all flowered white. So the genetics are always playing tricks. Pure white flowers, you rarely get to see it. Oh, another picture that's out of focus. Oh no, it's in the fog. It's early in the morning, and the fog is really thick, and it's cold. It's just a little bit above freezing. And you can see here's the open fruit, and you can see all the seeds inside. It's Conophytum obscurum. The individual heads are about 1/4 of an inch across. And it's just living on rock. But the rock harvests moisture out of the fog, and it trickles down to the roots. Okay, I couldn't control myself. This is not a mesem, so it's not supposed to be in this talk. But obviously, when you're hiking around here, you see a lot of strange stuff. Do any of you grow anisophylly? They like to be cold in the winter. So actually, I think you could grow them here in Houston. They would like your winters, and in the summertime, you just put it underneath, out of the sun in the shade, where they will sit all summer dormant. But they're in the daisy family. They're in the same family as sunflowers, and the plant is just all rough and knobby. Nellia schlechteri. There's thousands of kinds of mesembs. It'll drive you crazy. Nellia schlechteri. This one is named after Stephen Hammer, the famous mesem expert and author. And it's still covered over with the sheaths. It's a very tiny plant. The heads are about the size of a pencil eraser. And there's probably a baby right here. But you can't see the plant because most of the year it's covered over with old sheaths to protect itself from the sun. This is the king, the biggest Cono, Conoherianthus rex, and rex means king. And it's the biggest one. The leaves are about 2 inches long. And here we are, we're way up in the northwest corner of South Africa. The annual rainfall here is between 1 and 2 inches. They grow up to 2 inches tall. So you can see it. It's a big plant with big flowers. Very few people get to see it. And here's a colony of wrecks growing in between some big boulders. I like the nice pink racing stripe edges, huh? That's kind of cool. Makes them look sleek. I'll show you some lithops pictures. So this is lithops dinteri, and it's growing up near the Orange River. And the annual rainfall here is between 1 and 2 inches. So do you worry about your lithops so much? And look what it's growing. It's just in rock. And next I have, this is the side view. So the plants are pretty much just flat with the quartz rock. The red spots make it lithops dinteri because they always have red spots. There's just no soil here. I don't know how these plants pull this stuff off because they're so tiny as a seedling. It's just amazing their ability to survive. This is another one of the hairy conophytums. You see all the white hairs coming out of the body? It's Conostephani subspecies helmuti. It's another one of the tiny guys. There's lithops marmorata in nature. The reason they're rough is because they have the properties of just like an accordion. When it's dry, they shrink. And then when there's some rain, they'll really puff up. They have to be able to stretch because if they puffed up too big, they would burst open and then they would die. This one was really hard to find. It took us a long time to find a few of these. You can see the fruit. The fruit is really big and easy to see. And then the body is just emerging from underground where it spent the summer. And it's popping up for the winter. It's Conophytum monii, like the poet. Monii subspecies latum. And I just wanted to show, always when you're out exploring for these plants, you see a ton of other stuff. There's crassulas, there's aloes, there's euphorbias, there's just all sorts of stuff. And here's a Pachypodium namaquanum growing just above an aloe. The way they pronounce their G's, it's a sound. So it's aloe peripensis. You have to pretend you're going to spit, but it's Harip is it's the San people's name for the Orange River. So there's a lot of plants are named after the San name for the Orange River. Here's Cono angelicae, variety tetragonum. It has 4 sides. There's the flower bud coming, and you can see for some bizarre reason this conophytum has 4 square sides. So it's called tetragonum. And it's weird how this particular plant, the bodies are square. They're cubical. Here's Conophytum calculus coming into flower. They flower at night. So if you go out early in the morning, you can still see the flowers open. The reason it's called calculus, in the old days, back 2,000 years ago, the name of the beads on the abacus, the individual beads were called calculus by the Greeks. So the name stuck because it looks like the beads of an abacus. Antimima pumila has the nice racing stripes on the side of the leaves. Very small. You've seen a lot of sheaths. This one, the sheaths don't really completely form, they're just threads. So when the sheath breaks at the beginning of the growing season, they just have all of these threads like a collar around their neck. It's Entomema pygmea. Yeah. Conophytum minimum. And they love to grow on almost the vertical sides of rocks that are covered with lichen, and they're south facing. Is that the sunny side or the shady side here? Yeah, shady side. The south side is shady, the north side is hot and dry. So they're on the cool south side of the rocks growing in the lichen. And it's just an incredible thing to see how nature has come up with all of these ways for plants to survive. This is one of the mesembs that has an underground caudex. There's a caudex underneath there, and the caudex on these plants it's the size of an orange to a grapefruit, depending on how old it is. So during the summer, this is what you would see. This would be the view. Nothing. You just see the rocks. But then in the fall, the new growth emerges from the underground caudex, and the leaves pop up and then they flower. And they're in leaf all during the winter. The leaves can be just incredibly beautiful. That's just an amazing plant.
What's the fruit?
The leaves are about as thick as your typical spaghetti noodle,
What's the fruit?
but the surface of the leaf is covered with this water storage tissue. It's like a water battery backup. So if there's some rain, then it quickly fills up all these little storage tissue full of water to keep it over if there's a dry time. But it's hard to believe that it's a real plant. It's just so bizarre. Philobolus resurgens. It's called resurgens because in the fall it resurfaces like a submarine coming up out of the ocean, and these leaves emerge through the ground and then they flower. Whoops, sorry, hit the wrong button. Yes, there is a plant here. This is Aloanopsis. Here's the plant, and there's the plant in flower. And this is growing on a high plateau in South Africa. This is the coldest part of South Africa, and it freezes hard here. The climate is a lot like central New Mexico, where in the wintertime here, it can get down to around 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And the plants will be covered with snow, but look what it's growing in. It's just fractured shale. Here's the plant that has this one. I took a picture of this plant because you can see the plant. Most of the plants you couldn't see because they were just covered with flowers. This one has flower buds coming. Right there's a flower bud, and here's a bud, and so in a week or 10 days or so, it'll be covered with flowers too. But This plant has the ability to withstand really extreme cold and then flower in the spring. And there's two things that are interesting about it to me. People in Denver grow this plant outside and it will survive about 20 degrees below zero. So it's really tough. And it flowers in the late winter when it's still freezing hard at night. The nights that we stayed here, they froze hard. And the cold does not hurt the flowers at all. I can't think of a single cactus where the cactus flower can go down way below freezing. All cactus that I know of, the flower would be destroyed. Growing with the previous Aloanopsis, this is Stomatium residolens. This is another great candidate for the year of the dragon. Beautiful. The leaves are covered with sandpaper, and then there's these teeth coming out the side. Just an amazing plant. And it's living here where it freezes hard. Another plant in the same area, Pararoa concava. It's never been in cultivation that I know of, but the leaves are so charming with all of these bumps. In the same area, due to the cold, Russia indurata. It's pink because it's freezing hard. Are we low on time? Okay.
I could sit here and thank you for your mesembs. I could watch them all night.
Well,
Thank you for coming.
well, can I show the last two?
Yes, please.
We'll just
Oh,
Aloanopsis acuta growing in a mud pan.
oh my goodness.
There's Stomatium suaveolens, like coarse sandpaper.
Oh, my God. Oh, wow.
That's the flower bud. Sometimes you can't walk.
Yeah.
Need to go with slides, but too fast.
Baby toes, do you grow baby toes?
Try to.
It's very difficult.
And that's what the habitat looks like for baby toes.
Oh, my gosh.
The annual rainfall is about 1 inch.
What's the baby soil? What soil is that growing in? Pure sand?
It's sand, but it's not dead sand. It's biologically very active. It's full of microorganisms. Okay. We spend, no, not yet. We spend a lot of time climbing and climbing all day to get to the top of the mountains. And when you get to the top of the mountains, you look out and you see, oh crap, there's 100 other mountains, and what in the world is out there? And you never know. And here's the man that I go hiking with all the time. His name is Carl DeToy. He's my hiking companion. And he and I, we just love hiking and walking all day up in the mountains. That,
Thank you, Mr. Brack, for coming. These mesembs, unlike I think sure most of us have never seen. And we'll never see in situ.
no, and I'm just scratching the surface.
I'm sure. We have something little for you. We made some anniversary pots. And we thought
Oh, thank
you
you.
wouldn't mind lugging it
That's
home.
really nice. Thank you. Thank you.
This is all made possible by the board voting for ECHO to have a budget to bring in